Hello, welcome back to Geek Warning, the tech podcast that has spent the entire month of June covering 9 different group sets, 5 different shows, the UCI's mess, and so much more. I'm Dave Rome, Senior Tech Editor for Escape Collective, and joining me this week,
Ronan McLaughlin, Senior Tech Editor at Escape Collective.
And Alex Hunt, Tech Editor also at Escape Collective.
Hello both. I don't know if my count was right. I think it might have been 8 group sets and 4 shows in June. But either way, it's been a busy month for anyone that is interested in cycling tech.
You also said, Dave, UCI rules, but I mean, that's incorrect as well because it's just UCI joke.
Yes. Ronan, welcome back from your ride around Ireland. They did make some changes while you were gone. So I hope you like the new rulebook.
That ride was fueled mostly on anger.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. So where are we at with the UCI rules? Any changes? What are we working on?
Well, compared to last week when we recorded the show, there doesn't seem to be too much movement, but it definitely is an ongoing saga where I think brands are kind of watching the space at the minute, is the impression I get on talking to people, just to see if the rules are going to stick around and what that actually does mean for them. It's definitely a story we're still closely following, and we are working on a story to keep you informed and work out what that means, not only for the pros governed by the UCI, but also amateur cyclists that do compete under kind of their national governing bodies. So hopefully within the next few days or week, we should have a story that brings more light to the picture and actually answers the questions as to what it means for you.
Yep. So stay tuned on that one. I guess we won't be covering it more than that in this episode, but we do have plenty to get through. There's yet more group sets, which I think I'm including in the 9 that I mentioned earlier. We've got some new bikes to discuss, and a bunch of other things that are all related to the fact that Eurobike is currently on as we're recording this. A few days ago, we had Spoken, the Australian bike show, and we also had the Envy build-up roundup, which Rob English was at. So it's been a busy week of shows, but let's discuss one of the bigger news pieces that came out this past week, which is Shimano's 4th or 5th drivetrain release for the month, which is GRX Di2. The general story on this is that it's new, but there's also really nothing new. The shifters remain the same as what we'd previously seen with GRX 2x12 speed, which also means the brakes are the same. The cranks are basically the same as what we'd seen with 1x mechanical GRX, and same goes for the cassettes. The cassettes are borrowed from the mountain bike world, the 10 to 51 tooth cassette. And then the derailleur, it is now wireless, but it is basically a rebadged XT Di2 rear derailleur. The only real new piece, if you're ignoring the fresh logos on the derailleur, the only real new piece is the option of a left shifter that has no buttons to it. So, it has a little bonus button so you can do your head unit Bluetooth control, but it has no shift buttons to it. So, and I'd say most people that would be speccing one by might actually want those shift buttons so you can kind of have the bike set up SRAM style where your left hand is still kept occupied. That's basically Shimano GRX Di2. Ronan, Alex, is it everything you dreamed of?
I can't say it's everything I dreamed of, but I do recall yourself and James recording a podcast last year when 2x12 GRX came out and started being kind of perplexed at the fact that there still wasn't a 1x option. And I think, what we've seen here this week explains why there was a delay on the 1x option of that. It's because, as you said, it's effectively a rebadging exercise on the, which, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But it was, when I sat down to sort of digest what was new here from Shimano, it took me a second to go, this doesn't look too new. This looks very familiar. What's going on here? And then you kind of work out what it is. But
I mean, for what's interesting for me is like the why, because from what I can tell, and I mean what anyone can tell, is you could just piece this together with mixing existing GRX pieces with existing XT pieces and have yourself the exact same group set. But I think it's an OE play in which Shimano wants consistent branding and, to have a gravel branded group set put on bikes.
I think that's important as well, though, Dave, because I mean, for myself, down through the years, looking at GRX spec bikes, it can be kind of confusing at times, especially then if you throw in maybe a crankset from another manufacturer on entry-level bikes and stuff like that. And so if you then add it into the mix, stock bikes coming with XT derailleurs and GRX levers and that, I think it's worthwhile rebadging it here and having the complete GRX system for those types of bikes especially.
Yeah, counter argument to that though is SRAM, which we're seeing. Yes, they have their Explore group, which is like their race gravel stuff, a bit more limited on the cassette, but we're seeing more and more bikes equipping drop bar bikes with the transmission derailleur. So the mountain bike derailleur, 10 to 52 tooth cassette. The one that comes to mind is the new Cervelo Asparo 5 that's doing this out of the box.
Nothing wrong with that, Dave, but tell me this, would you run Campag wheels on a Shimano group set bike? Because it kind of feels like that to me.
I think I shamefully have before.
I mean, no, it's not. It's definitely not shamefully.
Yes, I mean, fulcrum exists for a reason.
Yeah, it's definitely not shamefully. I mean, I've done it as well, but it is one of those things that it's kind of like, it always feels like a mismatch. And so, yeah, seeing those transmission derailleurs on those bikes, it's fine. I'm being overly picky here for no good reason, but I still think like a group set that is, front to back, labeled up the same, it just looks more like it was meant to be. Whereas adding in transmission or XT always just leaves me feeling like, even though it's a brand new bike, it was spec'd that way, that's the way it rolled off the production line, still feels like it's kind of been aftermarket upgraded or whatever.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess to summarize this is it's fine. I mean, it's going to tick the box. It does, while SRAM is pushing everyone to get a UDH equipped frame, which is still kind of rare in the gravel world. Shimano is keeping those options open for everyone. I would say though, it's like, for me in my mind, it's kind of not necessarily bringing anything new to market versus like SRAM's previous generation, where you could mix an Eagle derailleur with a set of drop bar shifters. So I think it feels like Shimano just catching up, but that said, I've myself and Josh Weinberg have bikes with this new GRX stocked, and we'll be reviewing it in near time. So perhaps I'll change my opinion, but first impressions a little lackluster.
Is there anything new to bring though? What is there anything Shimano could have done here that would have give that feeling of a leapfrogging what SRAM has? No pun intended.
A 53 tooth cog.
Cog, he said, not chainring.
Cog, yeah. It's a really good question, actually. Yeah, I mean, like, what would Shimano have had to do to jump over SRAM in this sense? And I don't know. I think weight versus price would be fundamentally where you end up, and I think that's where SRAM still has Shimano beat.
There's also not a power meter option, is there, for the GRX cranks?
There is not, no.
Yeah, so people think what they think about the Shimano power meters, but it'd be nice to see for the racers a out-of-the-box power meter crank to compete with the Force rival or Red. Yep.
So anyway, one we'll come back on. I'm going to spend a bunch more time thinking about how this compares against a SRAM Force, and hopefully write that up in the near future. That wasn't the only Shimano-related group set news of the week, and Ronan, I think you're going to be pumped on this. It's something that you and I had complained about immensely in the past, where we reviewed the classified 2-speed hub system, and previously you had to have their separate little sprint-style shifter that connected to their own little wireless transmitter in the handlebar, but that has changed a little bit. So what's the story here?
This is good news. Basically, classified have, I don't know what's the right word here. It doesn't seem like partnered or collaborated or whatever, but anyway, they have now worked with Shimano. Yeah, work with Shimano to integrate shifting for their 2-speed hub into Shimano Di2 levers, which is probably the biggest issue we had with the classified system, was the requirement for their shifter button, which just wasn't the greatest satellite shifter button that was ever made, and so now having it integrated into the levers, that's a big deal in my opinion. It's a small thing, but it's a big deal.
Is it a big enough deal that, as someone that just rode a classified equipped bike with SRAM 13 speed, for 3,000 kilometers over 10 days, is it a big enough deal that you would swap back to Shimano shifting for this feature?
Since I seen the news about this, I had been wondering about that, and I think I still need to just go back, refresh my memory. What would be the option on the Shimano side? Definitely the 13 speed and the range within that cassette. Also, off the top of my head, I'm not sure if I could get that. Well, obviously not 13 speed, but the range even. Yeah, I don't know if it would have been enough for that specific ride, but certainly if I was speccing a road race bike now that I plan to put the classified system onto, it would be enough to get me onto Shimano rather than SRAM.
Interesting. So yeah, I guess the details of this is that it's basically a Bluetooth update on the classified side of things. So they offer a free firmware update for their through-axle Bluetooth receiver, and then that talks with the Bluetooth of Shimano Di2. So 11 speed with the D-Fly adapter or just native 12 speed shifters. Shimano haven't really had to do anything other than just like add classified to its approved Bluetooth partners. And that's basically Shimano's end of the deal. But yeah, it's a cool update.
That's Shimano's end of the deal, but I'm still kind of surprised that they were open to doing this. I mean, like, Shimano don't even do a one by road offering, but this you're only going to use a classified with a one by road setup. So it's kind of like an admission that people might be using other cranks and other chain rings and other setups.
And cassettes.
Yeah, and cassettes as well, exactly. Which is, let's call a spade here, is going to compromise Shimano's shifting experience. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of surprised that Shimano were open to do this.
Yeah, I'd say it probably came from the Shimano Europe side of things. We don't know the full story, but yeah, I guess in Shimano's point of view, it's not too different to them like enabling Wahoo or Garmin for you to control a head unit. It's kind of the same tech there, but it's as you said, it is opening the door to a potential competitor in some regards.
I mean, Classified have told us in the past that they're keen to work with all the group set manufacturers, and I guess this is kind of the first, except from the TRP Vista group set, this is the first partnership that we've seen with any of the three big group set manufacturers.
Yeah, and in a sense, so like let's just talk about that TRP Vista group set. The key thing that offers that this Shimano collab doesn't offer is the sequential shifting. So the TRP group set, you can have it set up sequential where it automatically just, you ask for a harder gear and it's either choosing between the hub or the derailleur gears to figure out what the next step is, and it's adjusting the rear gears accordingly. With Shimano, if you run a full Shimano 2x12 or 2x11 Di2 group set, you do have their synchro shift, which again offers the ability to have this sequential shifting, but you don't have that if you're pairing this Shimano and classified systems together. They really are just dumb to each other. They can't talk to each other, and so you have to manually control that front shifting.
Yeah. So I came home from that big ride last weekend. There was a giant TCR equipped with that new TRP Vistar group set, so I'm going to get a chance to try that out. And I'm very interested to try that sequential shifting because, I mean, just in my head, while I love the idea of it actually, the difference between like a derailleur shift and a classified power shift, I think it does require, yourself, you can't just like mash on the power when you're doing a derailleur actuated shift, whereas you can with a power shift. And so, am I going to be second guessing where and when I can maintain full power, or do I need to just like caress the chain over from one sprocket to another? And that's kind of why I've never really got on with the synchro shift with Shimano, or I think Campagne SRAM have similar versions, is like you don't really want to be attacking over the top of a climb or something, shifting up a gear, and you get a front chainring shift that you weren't expecting. So for me, I've just never really bothered with that.
Yeah, it's why you don't see synchro shift really used in the Pro Peloton.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all pretty much manually actuating their gears.
How did your that TCR come delivered? Like what cranks did come on it?
I thought you were asking like, how did it come delivered? As in, like you pop out for a week and then all of a sudden you just get a new bike waiting for you.
I was really perplexed by the question there, because I had another bike that I can't speak about it delivered at the same time that came in the weirdest box I've ever seen a bike delivered in. I was sure it was going to be like a.
Have you tested this? I mean, it sounds like if you go the opposite side of your country. For a while, things just appear. But have you tried like just closing your eyes or like turning your back to the front door and where the bikes still magically appear?
I just blinked and there's a time trial bike sitting in front of me.
Oh my!
It came delivered with TRP cranks. I will say this: that when I finished that ride, the following day I wasn't for doing anything, but the day after that, I opened the box. Confirmed that it was the TRP equipped bike I suspected it would be, took it out of the box and was incapable of attaching the handlebars to the stem because my fingers just do not work. So it took me 3 days to get a stem mounted on a bike. And there's nothing wrong with the stem. It was like a two-piece, and so, I haven't actually been on it yet to ride it, and I haven't gone over it in much detail, but I know it was a TRP crank. I don't know which like model or whatever, but and presumably they've got one specific to that group set.
This feels like a good moment to just plug your the podcast that you've got coming out related to your big ride. What can people expect to hear?
2 podcasts. Both will be on the Performance Process channel. One is sort of a general talk about what the ride was, why I did it, the motivation behind it. The charity that I was raising funds for, and the sort of the cause that I was raising awareness of, which was food allergies and just how severe they are. And the other episode was with yourself, Dave, and that was a Geek Warning and Performance Process crossover special, just going through all the ridiculous tech choices that I made. You remember that time I wrote the series about the dark side of marginal gains? This bike is maybe the darkest side of all the marginal gains. We break down what the hell I was thinking.
Speaking of trying to ride far and do it fast, there's been a bunch of new Aero-inspired gravel race bikes hit the market. Just a week ago, we had Cervelo release their Aspero 5, which I have. It is now built. But as you might be able to hear, I'm a little unwell, so haven't been able to ride it. But there are 2 others. So first on the list is Willier Rave SLR ID2. What's the general story with this one?
It's an update to the Rave SLR that came out 2021, I think. A bike that I reviewed back in, I think it was in Cycling Tips days. Yeah, it was. And a bike that I liked the idea of, but I didn't particularly like the trail net that they had built into this bike. I thought for a race bike it didn't really work for me, and so there had been hints that something new was coming, and now they've released the Rave SLR ID2, and again it's supposed to be more aero. They're claiming, was it 70 seconds over 40 kilometers? No, 40 seconds over 70 kilometers, something. There are aero gains.
A combination of those numbers.
It may as well be. It may as well be whatever number you want.
Only the thing definitely worth mentioning here is that it's 5.3 watts was the claim at 35 kilometers per hour. So still fast for gravel terms, but not. We're not talking 55k an hour here or something that would exaggerate the gains. They've also made it lighter and stiffer. It's got fully internal cable ridden, which it always had. But you remember a few months ago we had that conversation about manufacturers not providing trail figures or the details that you could use to calculate them. Knowing the sort of the one issue I had with the previous version of this bike, I was keen to see what the trail figure was for the new bike, but the details to calculate that are not provided on the geometry chart. I mean, Willier, they're good people over in Willier. I can contact them and get that. There won't be an issue there. But it was an example of it just not being published.
They also in the name don't give you the G or the L to know it's a gravel bike. Sorry, that'll.
I think it's too early in the morning for me.
The model's Rave. For those trying to write that joke down.
The actual aero claim here is 50 seconds across a 70-kilometer course, and again, 35k an hour. But if you remember last year, I did a piece on Willier's new Supersonica time trial bike, and we hear all the time from brands about how the time trial bikes are developed for the World Tour. They sort of have to do it for the pros. They don't sell all that well, although I'm hearing more and more that they just can't make enough of these time trial bikes these days. But the learnings they take from the time trial projects, they can then apply to other bikes. And when Willier would tell me that at the time, I was expecting, a road bike or whatever. But there are so many, not even subtle, but just directly almost copied design elements from that Supersonica that are now on this new gravel race bike, which does you always have to take aero claims with a pinch of salt, but looking at this, you can see how it would be faster than the previous version of the Rave, and I'm surprised that the claims aren't even bigger than they are, because just the head tube and the way it's sort of it's much deeper, the profile off the rear of it, and then the down tube and the way it tapers and stuff, and the sort of compensation triangle underneath the top tube and seat tube. There's just so much of this. When I look at it, I just see the Supersonica time trial bike, which is weird in a gravel bike.
It's funny you mentioned that, because a few years ago, a brand off record told me that its gravel bike had tested faster than its road bike in a wind tunnel.
Wow.
And it was basically down to the fact that all the tire clearance around the wheel. Now we've seen a lot of wide fork designs come into the market, and I think that is potentially something to keep in mind if you're looking to put road tires into one of these things.
Good weird.
They might actually be competitively fast.
Yeah, when I said weird, I meant good weird, of course.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to see more and more of these aero bikes that actually look like road bikes, but with just space for fat tires that, in my opinion, you could probably use as a road bike for the bunch and then have a second set of wheels for. That's not a new theme. Original Open Up even used to do that, but I think we're seeing gravel bikes sort of follow the trends in road, where that's still very much a possible thing.
Yeah, and I think compared to the bike we're going to talk about in a minute and the Cervelo from last week, it's nice to see a kind of aero optimized gravel bike that does have clearance for what would still be considered wide tires. The Rave's got clearance for 52 millimeters, which, I think for most people racing, that should be enough to satisfy them, and should prevent the comments from being all about the tire clearance, which is
yes,
good to see, because as we touched on last week, the Cervelo was 45, and Orbea's latest gravel bike, which we'll get to in a minute, that's also 45, which, as the comments have shown, is definitely not enough for a lot of people.
Well, let's talk about that Orbea, the Terra Race. It's along the same themes.
I think it's interesting from Orbea, because it was only last week that the other Terra, the Terra Adventure, was launched, and or just rather the Terra actually, which is quite a difficult naming convention to get used to. That one's just called the Terra and one's called the Terra Race, but they're completely different bikes aimed at different things. But as the name would suggest, the Terra Race is their kind of more race-focused bike, more aerodynamically optimized, and also, as we just touched on, for a gravel race bike, it's quite interesting to see that they've stuck with what would be considered fairly narrow tire clearance at 45 millimeters. I know at Unbound we saw that the bike had squeezed a 50mm tire in the front and a 45 in the back, but it's interesting to see that Orbea with their race bike have stuck with what's considered fairly conservative clearance.
Yeah. I have a theory on this category with its aero gravel race bikes that are quite aggressive in geometry, that have pretty good chainring clearance, maybe a 45 millimeter tire clearance. I think in 1 to 2 years, maybe longer, we'll just be referring to them as all-road bikes. I think these are kind of the new performance all-road bike category that we're seeing. I don't know. I think it's going to be the sort of person that does want just one drop bar bike to do all the performance leading things. They're fit enough to have a aggressive position, but they don't want multiple race bikes.
I have to say, out of all the gravel bikes, historically, it has been pretty well documented for gravel bikes and not really for me. But out of all of the gravel bikes, definitely the Cervelo last week or the Orbea are probably the most appealing for me, because they are still, like you were saying about the two wheel sets, you can have a pretty much a road bike and an adventure bike that can double up and do it all. And I think for me, that's probably the most appealing kind of setup for a gravel bike, rather than having the trend for super wide tyres and more relaxed geometry. Having something that feels familiar, that I can just stick on a dirt path every now and then if I make a navigation faux pas, or heaven forbid I do actually head out on some gravel. It's definitely more appealing than some other bikes. So yeah, I'd be very interested to swing a leg over the Terra Race and see how it compares.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly something I'll be doing with the Cervelo, which comes stock with like 42mm slick tires, which is quite a interesting selection. And yeah, I've been, also riding a road bike that fits 40s lately and testing that with 40mm slick tires. And I don't know, the gap between those bikes is awfully small. It's kind of down to the gearing you want almost in many cases. So anyway, I think a category to keep watching. But yeah, I mean, as gravel keeps splintering, I mean, we're seeing these like very mountain bike inspired gravel bikes, and we're seeing use cases where I truly believe like a wide tire and a suspension fork is going to be the fastest option if you are racing. It's kind of, it continues to be interesting to see like this continual split in what gravel means. All right, so as I mentioned earlier in the week, we're in the thick of trade show season. Eurobike is on at this very moment. We've got Josh Weinberg and Suvi Loponen of Escape both there on the ground, covering it with plenty more to come. And we're going to have a little bit of a segment from them from on the ground, which you'll hear just in a little bit. But leading up into Eurobike, we had a bunch of big news. One of them coming out of the Mountain Bike World Cup game, which was that it seems Brembo, the automotive brake specialists, are back and I guess trying their hand at cycling again. Alex, what's happening here?
There's been a lot of speculation around this for a little while now, with the Specialized Gravity team being spotted on some unfamiliar red brakes. But in the past week, it has actually been confirmed that they are in fact Brembos, as people had been speculating. And it's it is a really interesting move to see the brand make a step into downhill racing, partnering specifically with Specialized Gravity team for the time being. But yeah, for such a brand with such a legacy in rallying and other motorsport, it'll be interesting to see how they stack up against the competition and what they can bring over into the mountain bike space that can challenge the competition.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's worth noting like that team is also sponsored by Öhlins, the suspension specialists, and Brembo actually acquired Öhlins late last year, and I think that's makes a whole lot of sense when you see that collaboration sponsoring that team. I think it's one to watch because Brembo is not a small company, and dare I say they're not going to want their brand on a brake that isn't nearly class leading or is class leading. So yeah.
And this is it's worth noting that Brembo, or a company operating under a different name but owned by Brembo, have been in the World Cup before, but this is the first time that Brembo have actually put their name onto the brakes that are being raced, rather than, I can't remember what the brakes are called in the past, but they were under a different name.
Yeah, there was a very brief Brembo appearance in like early 2000s. And they did sell them very briefly, but there's very few brakes in the market. They quickly disappeared with no word as to why. So it has been about 20 years since we last saw them in the market. But who knows? I still don't think they're available for sale yet. So still one to watch. Who knows? Maybe this will be yet another appearance of Brembo without actual product to buy. All right, so from brakes that are probably going to cost more than €1,000, let's talk about a whole bike that costs just €1,000. Canyon announced their Endurace AllRoad, which is kind of just a do-it-all, whatever you want it to be, drop bar aluminium bicycle. €1,000. I think this looks pretty cool. I actually asked for one for review, and it might happen in the future, but for now they are completely sold out.
I'm really excited about this bike. I think it's really refreshing to actually see a bike that's been designed at a price point which is, possible for a lot of people that might just be looking to get into cycling, or might just be looking for a bike to double up as transportation as well as something to do at the weekend, but also with a spec choice and a design that's well thought out, rather than just kind of built solely with the idea of hitting that €1,000 price point. So I believe it's got tyre clearance for, is it 40 or 42 millimeter tyres?
I think it's 40s, yeah.
And Shimano Q's drop bar group set. And also we had a brief demonstration of this bike when I was out at Tracker with Canyon, and the whole point is they've tried to make the process of receiving the bike as easy as possible for people that, you know, don't have years of cycling experience. So unboxing it and building it should be fairly stress-free. There are assembly cards that come with it to help guide you through the process. I think, having had a look on the Canyon website, the only thing that does feel a little bit like a misstep from them potentially is the cockpit and crank length spec choice doesn't necessarily match up with what you'd hope for, especially the smaller sizes. I think a 400mm bar is the smallest it goes, which on the double extra small for someone that's probably, you know, 5'3" or under is probably going to feel a little bit too big and might compromise their feeling of the bike, especially if this is their first bike and they don't know quite what they're looking for component wise. So it would have been nice to see Canyon stock a slightly smaller bar, but overall I think this new bike's really interesting.
At least it'll be ready to go into the world tour straight out of the box.
Have to check the hood to hood measurements, but probably.
Yeah. I would say from my point of view, the use of hydraulic disc brakes is really nice to see at this price point. Having tested a lot of bikes at this price point, they often come with like horrible mechanical disc brakes. Not that all mechanical disc brakes are horrible, but just once you route the cables through underneath bar tape and then use cheap housing and then connect them to a cheap mechanical disc brake, things tend to be bad. So nice to see hydraulic Shimano's there.
I was pleasantly surprised to see that also. And then other things just like, I mean, very simple, but the top tube mount for like a bento box and that, it's like, I just wasn't expecting detail like that when I heard the price point before I seen the bike. So that's nice to see. I think what we're still missing though is a pure road bike at this price point. I mean, if you wanted to, I'm thinking about my first bike was a Trek 1000. FYI, Alex, I had no idea if the handlebars were too wide, too narrow, what the crank lengths were. They were 170s in hindsight, but at the time, I didn't even know there was a thing. That was a thing. I was told to set up my saddle height by hogging the saddle with my armpit and reaching down, and my fingers should just about reach the center of the bottom bracket. So that's how I got my original saddle height.
Why have we not seen that in a performance process?
That's a new. Well, it's not a new one because that's 20 odd years ago. But yeah, it's an interesting one.
It's much more sophisticated than stand next to the bike and line the saddle up to your hip.
I'm not sure which would get you closer, but either way. But what that Trek 1000 was it was a bike that I went to races and stuff, like club races on, and it had a geometry that you could race with, if I remember correctly, and that a road race bike doesn't, to the best of my knowledge, this well spec'd doesn't exist at this price point at the moment. So it'd be nice to see Canyon, you know, this is Endurace AllRoad, could they do a version of the Ultimate or something at the same price point?
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see whether they think there's demand for that as well, because this is like being pitched as like, if you don't know what sort of bike you want, this is it. You know, it can be a gravel bike, it can be a commuter, it can be a road bike. It's kind of just vague.
And so, I hesitated in making this point because demand will be the key here. If there is demand, they will obviously make it because then they can sell it. But I wonder if it's one of those build it and they'll come, because at the moment it's just getting so pricey to get into racing. Like, if you're a kid, or if you're a parent buying a bike for a kid, or if you're a college student looking to get into racing or something, yeah, we're literally pricing people out of the sport. And so
100%. I mean, yeah, like you and I would have started in a generation, and probably Alex as well, you would have also started in a generation where a rim brake Cannondale CAD was kind of like the go-to, and they went down to really low prices. They actually kind of still do, to be honest. They're just not that easy to come across these days. But yeah, you also had like a Specialized Delay, and you had all these great aluminium bikes that rim brake, basic components, but they were relatively affordable. And yeah, I mean, disc brakes and wide tires and all that have made bikes better in some ways, but they've also made them significantly heavier, more expensive, and less attainable at this low end.
€600, I think my Trek 1000 was in 2002, which, when you compare it to this, yeah, that seems off the top of my head, that seems pretty much in line with inflation, if not inflation busting.
Well, speaking of €600, Alex, you recently spent a bunch of time on BMC's new bike.
Yes.
What did BMC launch?
So BMC have launched their fifth generation of the Team Machine SLR platform. So historically, this has been their kind of do-it-all road race bike. It was the third generation that Cadell Evans used to ride into Paris in yellow in 2011, and yeah, for a long time it's been the bike that the BMC team or team sponsored by BMC have used. I mean, the waters got muddied last year when they launched the Team Machine R, which is a bike they built in collaboration with the Red Bull technology, Formula One technology team. And that's kind of become their kind of do-it-all, all-rounder road race bike that's a little bit more aerodynamically optimized than the SLR. But that has meant that this fifth generation has been kind of freed up from its post as a do-it-all bike, and they've kind of used that opportunity to go ahead and chase lightness and create kind of the lightest platform of the SLR that they could.
All right, so they've chased lightness. Have they done enough in that regard?
I would argue no. I think especially when you look at the price point that the SLR01 is, which is $13,000 or euros, that puts it bang in line with Scott's Addict RC, which came out last year. And I mean, with bottle cage and a computer mount, the SLR comes in at 6.6 kilos for a 54 centimeter, which, although is light and does come under the UCI limit, it is still around 550 grams heavier than the Addict set up in the same way.
Which one comes with the more impractical tires?
Definitely the BMC. So BMC have stuck.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they've stuck with 26 millimeters as the nominal value, and that's what it ships with. Some Pirelli P026, and tire clearance is 32 millimeters, which is fine. I think that's in line with the Tarmac SL8 and other race bikes. But I think when you look at the range BMC offer with the Team Machine R and the Road Machine, having something that had clearance for maybe 34 or 36 millimeters would have put it positioned more in the middle, whereas it's kind of, it's quite a big leap in their range to go from 32 millimeters with the SLR to 40 with the Road Machine.
I can understand the skepticism here. Is that the right? I don't think it's the right word, but I 100% appreciate where you're coming from, Alex. But I just wonder if, first of all, if this new bike was maybe designed for two-door, and so while they chase lightness, they only had to be at 6.8 because it's going to be used in the World Tour and the UCI limit is 6.8 kilos, so it's lighter than Team Machine R. But then also, is it like, the question is, did they go far enough? And viewed compared to other bikes, probably not. But if you're a customer looking at the BMC range, I dare say that the Team Machine R is maybe too extreme an aero race bike for many, and this gives BMC an offering that is just a more practical, a more maybe enjoyable bike, a more of an all-rounder bike. I'm not sure if I'm making the point very well, but do I make any sense?
Maybe the better comparison is like a Tarmac SL8 versus a super duper light like Addict.
I think maybe the comparison I'm looking for is the SL8 versus the Athos. It's like the SL8 is still very much a race bike, but it's like even if you're not into racing, it's a practical bike. It's a bike that would appeal to those who are not into racing. Whereas the Team Machine R is so aerodynamically focused, I'm not sure if that appeals to the average rider who maybe isn't interested in racing. Whereas this maybe is something that would appeal to a broader spectrum of the market.
I definitely agree, and I do think that this is, I say in the article I wrote for this, but it does feel like it's more of a consumer bike than it is a pro bike. I think Tudor are overwhelmingly going to still be on the R. My only concern with that is the geometry compared to the R is pretty much identical. There's a slight change in the seat tube angle and head tube angle, but in terms of the reach and stack measurements and trail, the fit is identical across both bikes.
And that's kind of, I think that's kind of my point, is that they've made a lightweight racing bike and built it on the one hand for what Tudor, their pro cycling team, would need, but on the other hand, it's supposed to be also the offering that more of the market might want. and I'm not sure if he can do those two things in one. So I mean, I think you're right that the two-door team will probably keep racing the R for most stages, but I could bet my bottom dollar now that most of the team will be on it for the mountainous stages, especially the climbers, and probably a rider like Alaphilippe will not ride the R going forward. To probably prefer a bike like this, even if it isn't as race specific as maybe the R is.
For me, like regardless of who it's for, I think the spec they've chosen confuses the story. I think the Addict RC and the Ultimate spec coming with what are the tires? The Schwalbe Aerothin tires that both you and Suvi punctured pretty quickly, and then I think this one coming with 26mm tires. I think it's a way to cut the weight of the claimed weight, and I think it's cheating.
Yeah, exactly.
See, there is a way they could cut the claimed weight in a way that I think people would be quite happy to see, though, and it's one of my biggest criticisms of some of the, especially the Shimano build.
Is it to reduce the size of the graphic on the down tube?
I mean, that is just for anyone that hasn't seen it, definitely head over to the website and at least take a look at the images, because the BMC logo has now outgrown the frame it sits on. So, but no, the biggest way that the SLR could have saved weight, which I think would have made more sense, is the gear ratios it stocks with are just crazy for a bike that's aimed at a climbing bike. The Shimano build comes with a 5236 and then a 1130. Which, you know, I would argue go for the 1134 and maybe a compact, a full compact. But the SRAM also comes with the 4835 and then the 1133. So it just seems like they've gone for the biggest chain rings they can, and also cassettes that maybe don't offer the range that a climbing bike should have. Which is kind of the opposite to how Scott with the Addict has kind of approached it, where they've gone very climbing heavy, which arguably is to hit the weight limit, but they've gone with the 4633 chain rings and then an 1136, which, at least in my experience around the UK, has given a gear range which is far more conducive to climbing, especially on the kind of steeper gradients we have around the Cotswolds.
Yeah, I mean, BMC's definitely gone with the race perspective there on that bike rather than the consumer side of things. Well, that bike, along with a lot of other things you'll find covered on Escape Collective. Yeah, Alex, I know you spent a few days doing long rides on that thing. You don't have a full review, but it's kind of like an early review and enough time that you felt was ample to get a feel for the bike. So you've got a full write-up available online for that. All right, Ronan, we spoke about narrow tires, but this one isn't guilty of that. There's a new limited edition race tire from Conti. What is this?
It's an outright road racing tire developed, they're saying, in collaboration with and probably for Team UAE Emirates. It's called the Archetype. It's not the replacement for the STR or the TTTR or the Aero 111. It's a brand new tire, and I think it's a 15% lower rolling resistance they're claiming than the STR. And that's kind of found, and they've achieved that sort of through removing the puncture breaker and other bits and pieces. So it's puncture resistance is down something along the lines of 40%, I think was the lab result. So this is, it's a lightweight, fast rolling new tire from Conti, only available in 30mm width. And so, I expect to see Pogacar and the likes on it in the Tour. I do have a pair delivered, arrived to me just before I set off for that big round Ireland cycle. I was so tempted to use it. The claimed 15% rolling resistance saving was very tempting. I also just wanted to be able to have a review ready for today, and 3,000 kilometers on the thing sort of seemed like it would give me ample opportunity to be able to write a review off the back of it. But in conversation with Continental, they sort of said to me, here, look, we would love to see you try this because we want to know how it fares. But in the end up, I went for the known quantity on the roads that I'd be riding. For me is the GP5000 STR. And so just, rather than being plagued with punctures, because there was some truly hideous roads. I took that safer bet, so I haven't yet been on the new tire.
It concerns me that you're even humouring rolling out the door for a 3,000 kilometer ride with a wholly untested tire that claims to have no puncture resistance.
Yeah, I'm very proud of myself that I resisted that urge, because I know in previous years I wouldn't have.
All right. Well, yeah. I think that's one you'll have a little bit of a write up on the website as well, and yeah, one that you'll probably put some time on. But I'd say we'll know whether it works, whether in the tour, whether how many times we see UAE putting their hand up for a wheel.
Look, I mean, Conti, they did say, look, we've been riding this thing in house since February in all conditions and all terrains, and even over light gravel. And Hannah Further, who I spoke to there, hasn't had a puncture yet, she claimed, and she said the team are reporting the same. But yeah, I mean, there was an interesting thing a couple of years ago. Apparently, Ineos did the entire Tour de France with their entire squad on the TTTR, which was originally a time trial tire, without a single puncture.
Yep.
I've never been able to confirm that, but that's I've heard that from multiple sources.
Yeah, I heard that too. Well, yeah, one to watch. And then yeah, last on the list of new things is Stages back.
Stages is selling power meters again, which was the title we went with on the headline for this article, and that they are back making power meters and selling power meters out of the United States, now under the ownership of SPIA Cycling Inc., which is a subsidiary of the Giant Group. And yeah, after the sort of much publicized and first reported by Skip Collective closure of Stages last year, in which they laid off all the staff effectively overnight, and were then acquired by Giant. They are, yeah, it was rough times for Stages and anybody who had a Stages power meter, but the good news is the brand is back and back selling power meters. The stock seems very, very limited on stagescycling.com at the moment. So yeah, it's maybe something to keep an eye on, but the good news is that, yeah, the brand that sort of brought about the power meter revolution with the introduction of a left-sided only option, which was much more affordable at the time, and got many more people into using power. Yeah, they're back, which is a good thing to see.
Yep. Two questions. One, what does this mean for people that bought Stages in the last year or two, might need a warranty?
Warranty wise, I don't know how else to say it other than the new Stages, they've doubled the warranty term, and so they're now offering 2 years of warranty support from the original date of purchase if you've got a receipt and the usual caveats. And so yeah, they'll stand over warranties on existing units, and then also if they've said something along the lines of additional loyalty discounts for those that sit outside the 2-year warranty window that they're now offering, or those that don't have a receipt and stuff. So it seems they're going to put a focus on what they're calling Stages rider support program, and trying to help riders out. Okay.
All right. And then the other question for me is, I mean, Giant for the last few years have been using their own power meters on some bikes, the Power Pro. I know I tested I don't even remember the model, but it came with like a Ultegra build kit, and their own power meter was attached to the Ultegra crank. Do we know what is going to happen with that power meter?
Not at this point. We don't know. We are working on a follow-up.
Yeah. I think from my point of view, it's probably safe to assume we'll see Giant start to use Stages power meters now that they are in the brand.
Yeah, I think it's a more recognizable brand, and it's another selling point. You know, if a bike on the shop floor has a Stages power meter, it's more recognizable than a Giant branded power meter.
All right, well, let's. I think that's the news for the week. Let's wrap it up there. I'm actually going to throw it over to Josh and Suvi, who are at Eurobike at the moment, and they've recorded something for us to hear. I have no idea what they've done, so we'll all hear it together right now.
Hello, fellow geeks. Josh Weinberg here, sitting with our colleague Suvi in Frankfurt, Germany at the Eurobike show. Today is our second day at the show, and we just wanted to check in and have a little chat about what we're seeing so far. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Suvi for a minute to report on a few things that she's seen.
Oh, the things that I've seen. I've seen so many things. Where do we start? Bikes. There's obviously a lot of bikes. Eurobike's known if it's over the years, I think it's moved more and more towards the kind of urban mobility side of things. So there's a lot of cargo bikes here. There's a lot of urban bikes. But there are also some bigger brands like Factor or Bea is here. So they've all got not necessarily new products on show, but some special colorways and special bikes. There's a lot of components and everything. What have you seen, Josh? Specifics.
A lot of tools, like that's.
Oh yeah.
There's certainly some tools spread out throughout the venue, which is kind of always cool to see and get a hands-on experience with things that you normally just see on the internet. So like bike stands, to wrenches and all sorts of things for working on bikes. And then there's a lot of seems like manufacturers that make parts for bikes or everything from wheels to handlebars and all sorts of things. A lot of them appear to be from some of the Asian factories, representing their capabilities and offerings. So I think this show kind of doubles as like consumer facing for brands to show off their new products, and then also for brands to go and engage with potential manufacturers for their products. So it's interesting to see like everything mixed together here. There'll be like one of these like carbon or like aluminum e-bike manufacturers like right next to like a brand that we know, like whatever, like one of the ones Suvi just mentioned, like Factor or something like that. So quite an interesting array and a mix of things to look at.
Yeah, it is definitely. And I think that's something that is different this year as well. I was here last year. That was my first year. This is your first year here. But it's quite different show to last year because those manufacturers were kind of bumped into one hole, but now they're kind of spread out. Like you said, they're right next to these manufacturers. So it's like you see, well, the actual manufacturers, and then you see the brands that are selling the finished product later on in the line. So yeah, it's a lot different show to what it was last year, and I think the overall consensus has been that the markets are doing better. I think seeing in the reports and that the industry is doing quite okay, but I don't know if the show is doing okay as such. There's been some mixed views of that. I think there's some quite got a lot of empty space, I would say.
Yeah, what do you notice this year from last, like in terms of what brands are here and what brands are not here?
I mean, Shimano has a strong presence here, and I think we talked a little bit about that. There's not huge launches around Eurobike anymore, whereas it used to be maybe a few years back. It was the big time to launch your product. But obviously, Shimano launched GRX, won by whether it was a big launch or not. Yeah. Questionable. They've got a big booth. Last year's Ram had a huge booth. They're not here at all. Scott, for example, isn't here at all, but yet there's some people from Scott, so they're still kind of hanging about, but they just haven't invested in actually having presence at the show. So it's quite interesting that those kind of major brands, they've decided to not come here.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I know they've really kind of ramped up like a bit of a handmade or boutique or bespoke section of the show here. So like some of the smaller brands and makers can display their bikes. But yesterday was Wednesday, so still a little early on in the show, but only like half of the booths were full of bikes. And it seems like maybe those folks wait until the weekend when it's more consumer facing to display their crafts. So hopefully there's more today, because I'd definitely like to photograph some of them.
Yeah, that's your plan for today. Yeah. I'm going to go hunt down, I think, more cargo bikes as well. I like to see. I didn't get to that hole at all yet, so that's my plan for today. And sustainability stuff. So
cool. All right. Well, maybe we'll check in again before we depart, but definitely stay tuned to the site where we'll be posting stories and galleries throughout the weekend.
And welcome back from Germany. I hope you all enjoyed your stay. Now we've got Ask a Wrench. This week it's myself and Mechanic to the Stars, Brad Copeland, answering a bunch of member questions. Those questions this week include our thoughts on mini hooked rims and how they may compare to hookless. We have a question about a crashed aluminium rim brake frame and what could be done about that, and also what we might consider recommending to replace it with. There's a question about how to know when to re-wax your wax chain, and also another question about an odd issue related to SRAM Explore gearing. We'll head on over to that in a moment, but in the meantime, I'm just going to give a little bit of a plug for what has been a very, very busy month on Escape Collective when it comes to tech. So yeah, we've covered all the new group sets. We've been present at all the big shows. I was at Spoken. We had Rob English filling in for us at the NV Builder Roundup. We've got 2 people on the ground at Eurobike. So yeah, do head over to escapecollective.com to see all of that. Some amazing galleries, World Cup coverage, reviews. It's all there. Well, it's time for Ask a Wrench. You will need to be a member to continue listening. You will need to be on our member-only feed. So head to escapecollective.com/join, sign up. And just a little quick note for any professional mechanics still listening that may not be members yet. We do have a special deal for you. We've had it since day one of Escape. You can basically sign up and become a member for our admin fee. So full details on that one within our FAQ at the bottom of the homepage. Where what does the next week hold for you both?
Oh, I'm
Right.
working on a gallery and a kind of little bit of a trip through memory lane on the past 10 years of Tour de France winning bikes. So a nice little reminisce before the tour kicks off.
Nice. And Ronan?
Can I please request loads of Vincenzo Nibali Campagnolo Super Record RS Mechanical from 2015, please? A group set that will forever haunt me, having passed up on the opportunity to own one of those. For myself, at the moment, Dave, I am sitting in, I think I'm in County Offaly here in Ireland, because we're down for the time trial national championships. We've been doing a bit of a project with a local rider around the time trial champs, bit of a performance process project, looking at all elements of optimizing his national championships race tonight. And so I've spent, before we get on the call there, double checking and triple checking his setup as UCI legal for about the 20th time. Still knowing that they use one of the old jigs here. I'm not confident that it's going to pass, even though it's well within the stated limits. So that'll be a nervous moment. But yeah, we've done a lot of cool and interesting and fun and quite game-changing work over the last few months, working with this writer, Marcus Christie is his name. And so yeah, tonight's just about putting all that into action, and then there'll be, probably after the tour at this point, but we'll have at least one, maybe a series of articles on what exactly we did do.
Nice. All right. Well, good luck for the result, and look forward to that. My shameless plug / what I'm still working on is all my galleries from Spoken, the Australian bike show. So I stand by this. I've said it over the years, but a lot of innovation comes out of that show. Australia being so remote, the builders often have to do something really unique or really push the boundaries in order to get international attention. And I think this year is more proof that that the Aussies do it well. So yeah, keep a lookout for that. All right. Alex, Ronan, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This episode was produced, edited, and mixed by Stuart Fife at Red Bricks Media.